right, good evening everyone. Thank you all for coming to our quarterly history night here at the Fargo Air Museum. My name is Ryan Thayer. I'm the Executive Director here at the Fargo Air Museum. I'd like to start off with going over our mission statement and a few of our updates to our programs here at the Fargo Air Museum. We promote aviation through preservation, restoration, and education. With education, we do a lot of different programs for all ages to, again, educate the community on our history here in aviation and with our military and just general history of the area. We do that through our youth camps. We have 3 different types of youth camps. We have our basic education camps. We also have STEM and STEAM activities. And then we also have our newest course, Intro to Aviation, where kids can learn more about careers in aviation. We also do adult education too, similar to our quarterly history nights here we're doing tonight. We're bringing speakers and certain items to highlight that just promotes our military history and our local community's history. We've also built a drone cage through sponsorship with Eyesight Technologies, so kids can actually fly a drone and experience what it's like to fly firsthand. We've also partnered with some community partners and supporters to build out our flight sim lab, where adults and kids likewise can experience flight, fly over 30 different aircraft in any airport in the world with real-time weather, real-time traffic, real-time air traffic control, and virtual reality. So we're really trying to build an immersive, interactive museum. Our second mission point is preservation. We also want to preserve our history and keep sharing the stories. Our aircraft, our exhibits are beautiful, they're wonderful, but without the stories behind them, the meaning goes down drastically. So we want to preserve the stories. A few ways we're doing that is we do host monthly Veterans Coffee Hours. So if you are a veteran, please join us for our monthly coffee hours to socialize, have donuts and coffee out of the museum. We also, every other year, celebrate Vietnam Memorial Week. So we have a big celebration of Vietnam and have a lot of exhibits and speakers for that week. We've also partnered with NDSU, and I'm really, really excited with Max, our collections manager's help. We are officially digitizing all of our items and all of our exhibits. So all of our logbooks, all of our uniforms, everything that we have here at the museum will be digitized and be searchable online for anyone in the world. So that's very, very important to us that we can share our local history with the rest of the world. Then moving on to restoration. We also want to make sure that we're preserving that history through restoration. We do have 2 aircraft we're restoring in the second hangar. Our Stinson Reliant Gullwing, as well as the continued restoration of our BT-13, with the hope that we can make both aircraft airworthy and get those historic airplanes back in the air where they belong. We also have a lot of great partnerships with the Air National Guard here in Fargo, where we can display the F-4, we can display the F-16, so you guys can see more modern jets here at the museum. And we're also hoping that we can get the F-102 and their P-51 in here one day. We've also partnered with the big national military museums, like the National Museum for the Air Force, the National Museum for the Army, and the Navy. The Predator drone right over here is actually on loan through the U.S. Air Force National Museum, where again we can display unique, interesting aircraft here regularly in Fargo. So again, we're always looking for ways to add more interaction, more ways for you to enjoy the museum, not only with our exhibits, but again, speaker series and educational programs. But for tonight's presentation, we have Major General Alexander Macdonald, as more commonly known as General Mac. We have him here tonight speaking about his experience as a forward air control pilot. General Macdonald flew 36 combat missions in Korea, and he's earned the highest rating as Air Defense Pilot, Master of Air Defense. So we do have a short video we'd like to play as an introduction to General Macdonald.
Joined the Air National Guard in 1948, and in summer camp in 1950, I applied for a pilot training slot with the Air National Guard. I was accepted and went to Goodfellow Air Force Base, Texas in January of '51 and started flying the T-6. At that time, that was the first airplane you flew in pilot training.
On our own, we set up our own training programs and so on. And in fact, General Macdonald was in our class. When we got to a certain point, we would let the students sit in the cockpit and start the airplane and run it. And I remember the night Macdonald did that, he says, boy, he says, I gotta fly one of these.
Summer camp of '49, summer camp of '50, while I was working on airplanes. And Fred was the line chief and was the big guru and knew all about the airplanes. And so basically he'd have classes and teach us. I had a crew chief in '51 who didn't like to get up early in the morning, so he checked me out on how to warm the 51 up. So I'd get up at dark 30 and go out and pull all the covers off and start the airplane up and get all nice and warm, make sure everything, fluid levels were all up, the gas, oil, and all that. And then some pilot would come out and take my airplane and fly away. And I didn't like that, so that's when I decided I wanted to be that pilot. When I got to Korea, why they said, no, we don't fly the 51s anymore, we're transitioning into jets, how much jet time do you have? And I said, none, because I hadn't flown a jet. And they said, okay, well, we'll send you to Mosquitoes. And I said, what's a Mosquito? And they said, that's a T-6, a liaison airplane that's used for directing strikes by fighters and marking targets and things like that. Well, that wasn't what I wanted to do, but that's the assignment I got. We were called forward air controllers. And that's basically what we did, is we controlled the fighters. Or we'd pick the targets based on the ordnance they had and controlled them. So they couldn't drop any ordnance between the front and what they called the bomb line. The aircraft that was controlling the whole thing, the C-47, would call us and say, I have a flight of fighters for you. And so the fighters would come in and we'd tell them where the target was, see if they could pick it up. If they couldn't pick it up, why, we'd try and mark it with either artillery smoke or we had white phosphorus rockets on a T-6 we could fire into the target or as close to it as we could. And when they got done, why, then we'd go back over and assess the target. So I flew the T-6 about 25 missions, and then I spent 90 days at the front and then came back and flew some more missions. I finally ended up with 34 combat missions in T-6, about 100 hours.
Okay, are there any questions? I think that video covered a lot of things that I was going to talk about. I'm going to flesh out a little bit more of it, a little bit more about the Air National Guard. When my crew chief let me run that airplane up and I decided I want to go to pilot training, I went into the headquarters. They said, that's kind of interesting because we just got this thing down at Air National Guard men, at that time only men, could go to pilot training under the Air National Guard, stay in the Air National Guard. After you got done with pilot training, you go back to your unit again. And I said, boy, that's just exactly what I want to do. It sounds good to me. And the way they identified you as an Air National Guards member, I did regular Air Force, is up in the corner, the right-hand corner of all this paperwork, there'd be a little red A-N-G. That's the only difference between us and the regular Air Force, the little red A-N-G. So I went down to Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota to take my physical, and I went in and took my physical. This nice sergeant said to me, "I'm sorry, you flunked. You can't go to pilot training. But you can go to whistle training if you want, backseater." And I thought, I don't know about that. So, well, he said, "Come back tomorrow, tell me what you want to do." So I thought about it overnight, and I still had made up my mind, and I went back the next morning and I said to the sergeant, I said, "Could I look at the document, the regulation that said I can not be a pilot?" He said, "Sure." He opened it up. It had a whole bunch of things on it, but one of the things it had was here, you could only have a maximum of X number. I don't remember what the number was, 20 or something, decimal loss. So all of count all at the different frequencies. And once it got to 20, you were out. Yeah, I said, "Yeah, that's right." I said, "What's that little asterisk down there?" He said, "Oh, there's been an amendment to the regulation." I said, "Oh, is that right?" And he turned it over and he read it down and he said, "You passed." They changed it from a maximum of 20 to a maximum of 5 in any one of the decimal ranges or frequency ranges, and I passed in all of them. So I was on the pilot training. Went down to Goodfellow Air Force Base, and then from there went to Craig, P-51s. Because our unit was flying P-51s, F-51s. And so, since I was going to go back to the unit, the little Air National Guard on the right side, well, they had to send me to the same kind of aircraft, so they sent me P-51s, along with another young lad from Wyoming, who sadly washed out later on, and 49 Frenchmen. So you can imagine all the fun I had with 24, 25 Frenchmen. Because they split the two Americans. Obviously, they couldn't have us both in the same unit. So one would fly in the morning, one would fly and go to class, the other would fly in the afternoon, go to class. So we split up. But then we brought 10 more Americans in a little bit later because they filled up their jet school. So we had some Americans to talk to. And went through pilot training there at Goodfellow, and they sent me a little E&G up there. They sent me to the unit, which was on active duty now, at George Air Force Base, California. And I flew the 51 there for about a year. The rest of the class that I graduated with, the regular Air Force ones, all went to jet upgrade. But not me, I went to the 51s. And in November, we got a requisition for one pilot. At that time, they did not send units overseas, guard units. They were just pulling pilots out. And since I was the oldest head, non-World War II, best experienced pilot, I volunteered to go to Korea. The NG looked at me. But our unit was deactivated. Our unit came back to here to Fargo in December. Theoretically, I should have been sent back to Fargo with A&G up there north. But nobody saw it at that time. I didn't call it because at that time I really didn't know whether I wanted to stay on active duty, fly, or whether I wanted to come back to North Dakota. So anyway, I went to Korea. And as I said there, when I got to Travis Air Force Base to ship out to Korea, I should have realized something was wrong. Because they sent all the pilots over in airplanes. They put them in DC-4s at that time and flew them across. And they sent me across in the USS General E.T. Collins, a troop ship. 14 days. I was the only pilot on the boat, and I should have started thinking a little bit was going possibly wrong when I got to 5th Air Force Headquarters in Japan. Who are you? Hey, I'm Macdonald. I'm the hottest 51 pilot in the world. I'm going over to Korea and fly 51s. No, you're not. We're taking them out. How much jet time do you have? I should have been smart enough to say something like, what's a jet? But I didn't. I said, I don't have any jet time. He said, okay, you can go over to Mosquito. I had to ask him what a Mosquito was, and they gave me a short version. I went over there, checked into the base, and walked into the tent that I was assigned, and there sitting in the tent was a guy I'd gone through pilot training with. And he was just finishing up his 100 missions. He'd gone over there right out of pilot training. And so I got a nice briefing about what was going on, and he checked me out. I flew about 20 missions, and as you saw there in the video, we just checked the targets, put the airplanes in and told them which way to go and what airbags to drop. Marked the targets if they couldn't see them. Had an Army artillery officer in the back seat who would look at the targets also and had an Army point of view with it, which was probably pretty good for us. Because we didn't know anything. We always used to laugh and say, well, we put a 500-pound bomb on a little foxhole out the side of the mountain, and it's big enough now so it can hold a mortar. And then we drop a 1,000-pound bomb on it the next day, and said, now it's big enough to hold an artillery piece. All we did was go back in after they dropped their orders and tell them whether they hit the target or not. What kind of damage you could see, which usually wasn't much. It was kind of frustrating to just sit there and drop this orders. You got these, at that time they were called AEs. They were the same kind of airplane that they flew in Korea, or in Vietnam, Sky Raiders, and they could carry a bunch of ordnance. I had one flight come in one time, and the leader was having a terrible time picking out the target. And we put smoke on it. He told me finally, he said, yeah, I think I got it. I said, well, why don't you go in, and if it looks bad, well, I'll tell you to pull out. He said, once I roll in, I drop on the bottom because I can't pull out. I don't have enough. There's too much weight. I just wouldn't have it. So he dropped a 2,000-pound bomb. And lucky enough, he dropped it in the right place. But it was a little hairy there for a bit. After I finished someplace around 20 missions, when they sent us up to the front as a forward air controller. And what we do is they give us a Jeep. And we had a couple of enlisted guys. And we'd go set up a radio someplace, set the antenna up someplace, and use the radio Jeep, and we control aircraft from the ground at times. Sometimes the Mosquito would turn the airplanes over to us, sometimes we turn the airplanes over to the Mosquito. But we did the same thing from the ground we do from the air. We'd look at the target. If we had pictures, sometimes we had photo reconnaissance pictures of the target. And we figured out, if we could put aircraft in, what kind of ordnance we wanted, and we'd see if we could find it. We kind of worked with the Army and the Air Liaison Officer who was up at headquarters. I was in the punch bowl. I checked in there about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, went to the mess hall. Well, this is with the Army. Things are tough with the Army. I came from the Air Force. Clean sheets and all that kind of stuff. Now I went to the Army. And got done with supper. Mess sergeant came by and he said, sir, would you like creamy cocoa or creamy mint on your ice cream? I said, boy, things are really tough in the Army. I think you guys got it pretty good up here. But anyway, we were putting targets up. There was a line of tanks on the road, just off the road. They pulled up and dug themselves in. There was this road going along. I had pulled the radio jeep up on that road and set the antenna up on the other side, just a hill on the enemy side. And like a typical road, when they went along there, they took chainsaws and cut the trees off just at the level of the road. So I'm sitting there, and right here beside me is this nice big tree stump. It's nice enough to put a mortar shell right on that tree stump. Move me across the jeep I was sitting on the driver's side, move me across to the other side. One of my enlisted guys was standing up by the headlight, and he got hit with a shrapnel. And I got out of it, kind of woke up and got out of the jeep, got up there and see the bleeding. Took off my belt and the tourniquet on his leg. I thought the wound was on his leg, and I noticed it was coming out from under his black vest. And I hollered, medic, 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 as loud as I could, and the tankers had a medic. He came over and did first aid on him and got him taken out of there. I never found out until about, it must have been 10 years later that he died over in Japan. Excess, he lost his spleen and bleeding, and they couldn't stop it. They tried to stop it once, and then it started again. They couldn't stop it. He passed away. I looked at my Jeep afterwards, and you'll notice on that picture of the Jeep in the sequel, it's got a round, just about ½ inch diameter, just like a pipe. The force goes up around the background comes back. And there were two nice shrapnel holes in it. One right under my leg. It had been about 4 inches higher. I had a nice piece of shrapnel in my leg. And one right here. It had been about 4 inches ahead. It dealt very seriously if I'd be here, because that would have been right about the heart place for me. And both of them went in, and I wasn't smart enough. I should have dug one of them out anyway, got it out of there, but I didn't. So anyway, we went down and never recovered the Jeep. It got destroyed. In fact, I got a warrant from the Air Force after I got back to K-47 where we were stationed. They excused me from paying for the Jeep. I didn't have to pay for it. $60,000, and we wrote that off. But I had taken a chair, a folding metal chair, and took it along with me so I'd have something to sit in when I was talking to the airplane, so I wouldn't have to stand all the time, so I just wanted to sit while I waited. No, that's not authorized. You have to pay for that. Well, I wrote a couple letters and finally excused it, but that's the kind of stuff we were doing. Anyway, then I went back and finished up, and the last mission I flew was kind of an interesting one because it was just getting dark, and it was night, on the midnight that night when the fighting was going to stop. And I had a flight come in, and it was just getting dark, and I could not get that leader to see the target. I marked it, I did everything with it, and normally the enemy would not shoot at the mosquitoes with big stuff. I mean, they'd shoot at you with whatever they used, 30 caliber, 50 caliber, whatever that, but they normally didn't shoot at you with black, which the black stuff, or the 20 millimeter, which was like golf balls. Once in a while you'd see one, but not very often. But that evening, they were using up all their ammunition, I guess, because the war was going to be over, so no use taking it home. And they were shooting at us with everything, and shooting at me with everything. And I rolled in and marked the target, and I noticed right off my right wing where there was this black puck. And I thought, oh man, I don't know what, you know, I'm not going to be a hero the last day of the war. So I broke left. I told the leader, I said, did you pick the target up yet? He said, nope. I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just go north of the bomb line and drop your ordnance and go home? And he said, I think that's the best idea I've heard all day. So he went north, dropped his stuff, went home, and I went home, and that was the end of the war. We spent the next 4 months just flying around, killing time. And you got a wish sheet where you want to go. And I put my wishes down, TAC Southwest, TAC Southeast, ABC, North Central, because I wanted to go back and fly jets. And they sent all the mosquitoes to training command. Because we could go back and fly a T6, T-28 was what they put me in. I flew that for about 3 months. And they came to me one morning and said, we're going to check you out in the B-25. You're going to be a B-25 IP. And I said, oh, I don't want to fly the B-25. I'll never get in the fight. Oh yeah, once you get done with your turret here away, you can go to fighters. And I said, there's no fighter unit in the world that would take me. I'll have 1,000 hours of B-25 time. And if they take me, I probably don't want to go there anyway. I said, I think I'll just get out and sit. You know, they laughed about that. They said, you've got almost 2 years left of your obligation. And I said, AMG, up in the little right-hand corner, you've been holding me illegally since January or December 31st of last year. And they laughed about that. So I said, I will write a letter requesting release of active duty based upon that. And the squadron commander said, I'm not having anything to do with that. The first sergeant said, sir, I recommend that you send it forward. You don't have to prove it, but you can send it forward. So I said, okay, I'll send it forward. So he sent it forward. But 10 days later, they got a message. Release this man within 3 days or reply by endorsement to headquarters USAF. My little AMG worked. So I came back to Fargo, flew here, got to fly my jets, had the greatest time of my life. And the Korean experience was an experience that I'm glad it's over with. And I think I'll question.
Thank you, sir. That was great. Now we're going to open it up for our question and answer session. I'd like to introduce Max. He is our collections manager, and he will help facilitate the questions and answers. Feel free to have a seat, you guys. You guys like?
Before we begin, Mac, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this on behalf of the Fargo Air Museum and everyone here. We really appreciate it. So, thankfully, you answered a lot of my questions that I had written up in your speech, so we'll just get right into it. The first question, what base were you assigned to in Korea?
It's K-47. It was a town called Chungcheon. And I went back there in 1993. And the town was huge. In Korea, after the war, once Korea got moving, they didn't build a factory and bring the people in. They looked where the people were, and they built a factory there. So they built a factory in Chungcheon. They had a stadium there, outdoor stadium that was held more people than when I was there. The country was booming in that little area that we were at was booming too. And the airfield was still there.
Had it been turned into a civilian airfield by that time?
Yeah, I suppose he did. I didn't stay around long enough to know.
So for the Mosquito Squadron you were assigned to at K-47, were there multiple squadrons there, or was it just the one?
There were two squadrons, 48 and 49th. And we had, the country was split into three zones, east, west, and central. And my squadron, 49th, had which way, east zone. And we split the middle zone, and the other squadron had the west zone.
So you said that you flew AT-6 Mosquitoes. We actually have two T-6s here in the museum. From here, can you point out any obvious differences between the aircraft that you would have flown versus the ones that we have here?
We had racks on them to carry the rockets that we used to mark targets. And they had a few more antennas sticking on them because we had extra radios. So we could talk to the ground people and talk to the Army, could talk to their artillery positions and their Army guys. But other than that, they're the same thing. And I always used to tell, I never told people I flew AT-6. I always slurred that a little bit. And they said, were you in Korea? I said, yes. What did you fly? 86. Did you shoot down any eggs? No, I didn't.
So, I guess, what would a pre-flight check before, and just any average mission, what would that look like?
On the aircraft?
Yes.
Oh, that wasn't much. You just check to make sure your oil, gas, check your armor to make sure it was all safety, ready to go. That was my role.
You said that you flew 34 combat missions, and you mentioned that your aircraft was targeted by enemy ground fire. Did you ever have to worry about enemy aircraft in the same area?
No, never worried about enemy aircraft. We had what we call bed check Charlie that used to come over once in a while at night. This was down by the Army when I was in the punch bowl. And he'd come over, you could hear the engine coming, and he'd throw probably a couple of hand grenades or something off the side, there'd be a couple of explosions. And he'd go back, and it never caused anybody to do anything.
So my last question before we open up to the audience. You said you control fighters on attack strikes. Were there any aircraft that you, when you heard on the radio that they were on station, that you were like, yes, thank you? Or were there ones that you were like, oh, great, these guys?
Oh, yeah. Not on the radios or anything, but yeah, we talked to some of the guys and put in vaccines, and they tell us about their experiences and how happy they were that we were there, the mosquitoes were there, or the forward air controllers were there, because we had a lot of ordnance. They had their 105s, they had their mortars, they had their 155s, and even their 8-inch guns, but we had those 2,000-pound bombs and things like that could really make a difference.
All right, so now we're going to open up to the audience. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands, and Isabella here will bring the mic to you. We got one in the back.
Hey, Matt, what was the range of the rockets and how accurate were they?
Those 2.25. We were flying probably at 5,000 or 6,000 feet usually, because we tried to stay above the small arms fire range, and you'd roll in and toggle them off. The only thing you do is you get the puff of white phosphorus where it hit the ground and tell the fighter, well, go so far one way or the other from that. But they were not accurate at all. In fact, there was, they were going to arm us with 5-inch rockets. But that never happened because the war was over. But they would have had a little more range and would have been a little easier to see and a lot more accurate.
Matt, how old were you when you shipped out to go over to Korea?
Uh, 20, let's see, I'm trying to remember, I went over there December or January of 1953. So I was coming up on 24, 23 and a half.
Any other questions from the audience?
I'm now going to pass it off to Ryan.
Well, again, we are deeply honored and very, very thankful that you spoke tonight, Mac. We really appreciate it. Can we give Mac a round of applause? Well, then I wanted to say a special thanks to you guys, our supporters, our donors. Without our donors and our sponsors, we couldn't do programs like this. A special thanks to the Fargo Air Museum staff. They've all worked very, very hard to promote our new programs. And again, thank you to our board of directors for helping support our mission here at the museum, and all of our local sponsors and supporters like yourselves. We really do appreciate it. Without our supporters and donors, we would not be able to make this happen. So really do appreciate any donations or any sponsorships. It does help us keep increasing and improving upon our programming. You can make a donation on our website or on our donation box in the back. And if anyone's interested in sponsoring a history night or sponsoring a special event, please reach out to me directly. We'd love to work with you on that. And then lastly, our next history night is on April 26th, and we will be featuring the Blue Angels. Should be really fun, really good event. It'll be a Tuesday night, April 26th, and really hope that we see you guys there. And we do have a special treat tonight. We do have some wine, beer, refreshments, snacks in the back. And want to give another special thanks to the Fargo Air Show for sponsoring this social hour afterwards. So feel free to stick around the museum, check out some of our exhibits. Feel free to ask Max some more questions and just hang out and have some refreshments.
Just a little bit about, you were such an important part of this guard outfit out here. How about a little bit about how you got so involved with the guard here? Because I remember when I came to Fargo, you were running the thing out here.
You want to repeat that?
With the guard, as important as you are with this guard history out here. So after the war, how you got into it and got so involved out here. I know you were a reservist, but you ended up basically running this place.
Well, when I came off active duty, I think one of the first things I did was come out here. Actually, I was still a member. Remember, I had that little EMG on the right-hand side. I was a member of the Air National Guard. So I came out here, and it was kind of, I had quite a time. Dwayne Larson was running ops at the time. Happy. And I came out, put the flying suit on. He said, "You want to go for a hop?" I said, "Sure." So I came up, and I got the 51. Couldn't remember how it started. So he leaned over and started it for me. And I went out and flew, came back. A couple of days later, I came back in and want another hop? Sure. So I go out to my airplane. He's not with me. I had to have the crew chief start it for me. I don't remember how I've forgotten how to do that after those years, but I have. Anyway, then I got to fly jets from then on. And I was out here for a couple of years, farming at the time. Kelly's taking care of my land for me now, but I was farming, raising cattle and pigs. He came to me and said, would you like to fill in for one of our officers who's leaving? It was in the winter time, I didn't have much to do. And I said, sure. So I filled in for Tom Markey, who was gone to the National Guard Bureau for, I don't know, 90 days or something like that. And that went on, and then one day Marsh came to me, this was about a year later, and he said, I'd like you to be one of our flying training instructors. And that started it then. So I stayed on from that time till I retired.
And you were flying jets out here, right?
I was fortunate enough, that's my one of my many brag points. Fly by the Air National Guard, going to the Air National Guard, you can see their remembrance, their airplanes sitting there, 51, 94, 89. I fought every one of them, and I'm very proud of it. I haven't fought this, but I fought all the rest of them.
Mac, we have one more question here. Online, we have, was there a joint FAC or doctrine in place at that point, or did the Air Force have its own procedures that differentiated from how the Marine Corps was doing things?
No, it was, you're talking about going in on targets.
Yes.
No, the aircraft we put in were everybody, the Army, Navy, and the Marine, but not the Army, the Air Force. The Navy and the Marines. The Marines would fly them at that time mostly. F-4Us, Able Uncles, we call them Navies.
So it was pretty common to have a backseater that was Army, Navy, Marines.
No, the backseaters, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I'm talking about the aircraft. The backseaters were all Army. Now, we had no Marines on our side. The Marines were all on the West Coast. They may have had Marines, I don't know.
Sounds good.
Again, thank you all for coming, really appreciate it. Feel free to stop in the back for some refreshments. Thank you so much.